So I want to welcome everyone to today's SOLIDWORKS Composer 301. This is creating interactive documents for your end user. For those of you who have joined for the first two this year, SOLIDWORKS Composer 101 was creating basically images for your documentation. So typical process that we see our customers performing is they'll either go to the shop floor with a digital camera, they'll take some photos, and this happens after something's been put together or during the process of putting it together. And then they'll take those photos, plug those into like a template such as Microsoft Word or Excel or PowerPoint, whatever people tend to use, and then they'll publish that as a PDF, and that's like their static documentation. They disperse it either as a digital copy or paper copy. So the first one, we talked about how to create images for your instruction manuals and your SOPs and your assembly procedures and things like that. The second one, we dealt with animations. So that was SOLIDWORKS Composer 201, and it was just using Composer to basically create animations, how to do it, how to explode things, how to add graphics and labels and things like that, how to use the bill of material, parts list, etc. And that was all within the animation tool within Composer. Now, 301 kind of takes it a step further, and what we're looking at here on the screen is actually the SOLIDWORKS Composer Player, which is a great tool. If any of you are familiar with eDrawings, that is the free viewer tool for SOLIDWORKS. The Composer Player is the free viewing tool for SOLIDWORKS Composer. So the tool itself, the license that is purchased and used to create content, that's SOLIDWORKS Composer. The player plays whatever has been created in the Composer application. So what we're looking at right now is actually the Composer Player. And the reason I bring this up is because most people will say, okay, an interactive document, that sounds neat, but I don't know what that is. We've talked about creating images for our documentation, we've talked about animation, but what is an interactive document? So what I've seen from some of our customers who are starting to get into this interactive documentation is on their assembly floor, and this is just an example, but on their assembly floor, they'll have the different assembly stations set up with monitors, whether they're touch screen or they have a mouse. We can have additional conversations about that later. But the main thing here is that they have a workstation, an assembly station with a monitor, and they can open up these interactive documents and they can click through them. They can zoom in, zoom out, and they can rotate these 3D components. They can click on them to see their part number and things like that. So what we're looking at here is an interactive document, right? So this was a view that I created in Composer, and this view contains links. So depending on what I want to look at here, you could kind of consider this view a table of contents for my interactive document. So if I come in here and I click on work instructions, you'll notice what it does is it brings me to a new view, right? And then I have created these next buttons to kind of filter through my assembly procedure, right? So again, I'm just kind of showing this to you so you understand what an interactive document is. If you kind of continue on here, you'll notice something like this. Right, I'm able to go from view to view using what we call a linked button. If I want to take it a step further, I mean, at any time, really, anyone in here, they could, come in here and rotate parts around and things like that. I have my balloons set up to be static so they don't move, but we do have options for allowing balloons to move in 3D. But it's a nice tool here because we're able to kind of come in and zoom on components to make sure, we're grabbing the correct thing. And once that's finished, maybe I come in here and highlight what it is I'm looking for. I make sure I have all those components, and I just continue to move throughout the document, and once that's kind of finished, I think in this one here, we even have what we call a link to an external file, which is the completed manual, which is a PDF version of this interactive document. So I click on this, and if we kind of look through this, I'll kind of zoom out a little bit and just scroll through quickly, but you'll notice all those views that we were interactively clicking through and being able to rotate and zoom around, actually publish those into a PDF and then created an external link to this PDF for my user. So being able to create these links and what we call events within Composer really helps us to create some very interactive documents. Now, that was my link to my work instructions. Here are my animated instructions. And what this link is doing is it's basically starting an animation. So in my interactive document, I not only have views that are somewhat attached to one another, but I also have options for viewing assembly procedures using an animation. So here I'm kind of like letting the animation fly through. But basically, I'm just allowing my users with this interactive document to kind of answer their own questions when assembling something versus, if they don't understand something in the manual you handed them, or maybe an image is not very clear to them, they have to go and ask someone, take away time from the actual assembly procedure, etc. Whereas here, I'd be able to kind of zoom in, rotate, things like that. So this is my interactive document that I wanted to use as just an example, but let's get into the actual composer where we actually create this interactive document. So here you're noticing kind of the same model on the screen. A lot of these views are the same, right? So if I kind of click through these different views, we'll kind of see how everything has been captured in each view. Views are basically capturing not only orientation of the camera, but orientation of components and labels, as well as appearances of both components and labels. So these are all the things that our views in here are capturing. If we kind of jump over to the animation portion, I'll turn this on, and you'll notice that this animation is actually the same thing we just watched in that previous thing. So it's the assembly procedure for the arm, only it's been animated. So I want to make sure I turn on something here. I'm already noticing that my bill of materials is not showing up. So I'm going to come down here to my panels, and I'm just going to make sure that that's shown in the animation. So when we get to that portion, we'll actually see it. Okay, so animation, I think I have about 42 seconds of animation here. What we want to do here is we want to combine these two together to create an interactive document. Now, the one we looked at before, the finished interactive document, we're going to make ours a little different from that one. That one I made a table of contents where the user chose, kind of, do I want to click through views or do I want to watch an animation? It was kind of one or the other, but just keep in mind this whole interactive document can be very you have to use your creative processes to put together this interactive document. There's really a ton of different options of things you can do to create this. So first thing I want to do, knowing that when I'm finished with this in the Composer application, I'm going to be publishing this as either an executable or an HTML file. Right? We do have some additional options like 3D PDFs and things like that, but the two main ones that I see people using most often, HTML or an executable that you can burn to a disk, you can send it out via your network or whatever you need to do. But let's come back in here and kind of come to the top. I'm going to come back to my original view here. And the first thing I want to do, I'll kind of close this for the time being. First thing I want to do is make sure that I have a button for my users to push to go from one view to the next. Right? Because although we can let them choose from a view menu in the Composer player, I think sometimes we want people to move through our document sequentially. Right? I want to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. I don't want them jumping from 1 to 5 to 3 to 7, and assembling something incorrectly. So what I need to do is allow my users to click on certain things on the screen, and I need to make it kind of known on what they actually need to click on. So I'm going to come up to my Author tab, and I'm going to grab Text 2D. Before I do that, if you look under Image 2D, we actually have some predefined buttons that we can use from the start. And all I would need to do is just grab that and maybe put this Next button down in the bottom right-hand corner. Now, the reason I want to show this is because these predefined buttons are really just JPEG images. And what happens is when we place that, it has something called a link or event. Right? And this link or event, what it's doing is it's going to the next view. So whatever order our views are in up here in our views pane, it's going to go to the next view. So I could use this, that would be nice, but let's take it a step further and let's make a button from scratch. So I'll come up and grab Text 2D. come down to my bottom right-hand corner here. I guess I am going to open up this a little bit larger just so we can see what it is we're looking at here. Text string. First thing I want to do is make sure that I have something that my users understand on the button. So next should cover that. And I'll probably make this a little bit larger. Scale this up a little bit and maybe move it kind of closer to the corner. If I want to get incredibly specific with this button, I could come down here and use the placement options to put in specific values. But I want to scroll down a little further, and I want to look under the properties of this button that I have highlighted. I want you to notice this link property. Okay, this link property here now has, it's blank currently, but if I hit the ellipse, I can basically link this button to just about anything. So if I open up this URL option, I can link to an external file. I can link to a URL address or an FTP site. I can link to a specific view within my Composer document. I can link to the previous view, the next view, the first view, or the last view. And then the bottom three can be linked basically to the animation. And I can specify go to a specific marker in my animation, play from a specific marker in my animation, or only play a marker sequence in my animation. So I really can have my animation broken out into, different sections. Maybe I have a section for my arm assembly and I have a different section for my leg assembly. As long as I have the correct markers in my animation, I can have buttons that play those specific sequences. So here in this circumstance, I want to go to the next view. So I go ahead and say OK, and with this highlighted here, I'm changing this view here, this import default view. So I need to ensure that this next button keeps all of its properties. The next button stays on this view. So I'm going to go ahead and update this view. And you'll notice in my thumbnail, I get a little image of the next button down there. Now, I want this to go from one view to the next. So how would I normally go through and apply this same exact button that has the same exact link in all of these, right? I could go to view 2, create the same button, or turn it on in that view and then resave. But we actually have a nice little tool here. If I want to highlight all the views I want to apply this to, notice I have that next button highlighted. I also have all the views that I want to put that button on. So instead of hitting any one of these other ones to the left here, creating view, updating view, I'm going to use this option called Update Views with Selected Actors. So I'm going to click this, and what Composer will do is it will publish that button or that actor that you have highlighted, and there can be multiple, on all the views that you've specified. Now if I click to another view, you'll notice that next button remains the entire time. Okay? So that is a nice way to save some time, not having to do it per view. You can just do it in all views. So going in, kind of the next step is to ensure that this event or link happens properly. Nothing's worse than creating an interactive document where you hit a dead end because the button doesn't work. So in the bottom right-hand corner here, we have something called design mode, and this is always on by default when we open a document, but I'm going to uncheck this because what this allows is it allows us as the author of this document in the Composer application to kind of view our document from a Composer player standpoint. So now you'll notice as I hold my cursor over the next button, it actually highlights as my cursor changes, right? It changes from this kind of hand to an actual clicking icon. So when I click this now, you'll notice it brings me to my next view. And I can just kind of come through here and click on this next button to ensure that this is actually going from one view to the next, keeping in mind that where this is actually applicable is when my users are viewing this in the Composer player. So I know that that works, which is good. But, again, how do we link the animation with the view? Let's do this. Let's find a view where the arm is being assembled, and let's put an additional button in here for viewing this in animation mode. So I'm going to come to the author tool. Actually, what I'm probably going to do here, let's take this and let's hide this for the time being. I'm going to take this next button, make sure I'm back in design mode, otherwise it's just going to take me to the next view. I'll highlight this and I'll make a copy. And I'm going to bring this over here and I'm going to change its text to begin animation. Okay. Here I could kind of line these up if I wanted to perfectly, but I want to make sure really that everything else is on track first. So I want to come down here, and you'll notice the first thing is our link for this new button, because it was copied, just wants to bring me to the next view. So I already know that I'm going to need to change this to something. But first thing, to be safe, is to make sure that this new button called Begin Animation is saved in this view. So I'm going to go ahead and update this view. And let's switch to animation real quick, just so I can show you something. So you'll notice here at the beginning of my animation, I have a marker. I named it Begin Animation, but you can name it whatever you choose. Creating a marker is as easy as just clicking in this white space and then typing in something here. Okay? If you ever create a marker on accident, which I do frequently, you can just right-click on it and say Delete Marker. So we know what our marker's name is. It's Begin Animation. It's right at the beginning of our animation. Let's go back to this view and change the link for this Begin Animation button. So with this highlighted still, I'll come down to this link, and I'm going to change this to now not go to the next view, but to play the animation from a specific marker. Okay, so you'll see we have a current position option. We also have Begin Animation options. So I'm going to choose Begin Animation and say OK. And what do we need to do here? I made a change to a property of one of my collaborative actors. I need to update my view. Okay. So now that I've updated my view, let's turn design mode off and ensure that this thing will actually work. So in my view here, I have two buttons, one that goes next, one that begins my animation. Let's click on Begin Animation, and notice at the bottom of the screen my animation begins. Very cool. So let's walking through this animation now. There may be some portions in my animation where I want the animation to actually stop. So I think right here is a good portion. I think when I initially created this, if I'm going to publish my animation in AVI format, a user can just hit pause. But if we want to include this in an interactive document, I need to give them a place to pause, or maybe I pause it for them so they can see what's on the screen. So I'm going to kind of zoom into my animation here. Let's come down here and make a stop button that will automatically stop on this view so that the user can kind of gather all the located or the parts that are being shown on the screen. So I have my time bar at 9. I'm going to create a marker right above it, and I'm going to call this one BOM stop. And I need a marker in order to stop my animation here, but what I really want, I don't have to have a marker to stop my animation, but I want that just to keep track of my animation and where I'm at. I want to add a new text box. We'll kind of add that up here somewhere. Now, animation adding text boxes or buttons is a little more difficult than in a view. We just need to make sure we capture all the properties that we're changing from when we first dropped that box onto the animation. So here, let's just say, we'll just keep it kind of light. We'll say, I'm ready. Basically letting the user know they have located all the parts. I'll make this a little bit bigger. And we'll come down here, and what we will do under link for this button is we will choose basically to continue the sequence. So I'll say play, and then I'll choose my marker sequence called BOM stop. I'll say OK. And then the other thing I need to do in order to make this animation stop at this point is I need to turn on what we call pulse. So I'll turn on pulse. This will basically be blinking every 800 milliseconds in whatever color I choose. So this is what's really going to actually be the reason that the animation stops, is because it recognizes this pulse and it stops. So because I've added this and I've made a bunch of changes to a bunch of properties in here, I need to come here and highlight all the properties I've changed. Okay? So I've changed text as well as size. And then I need to set a property key just to ensure that at 9 seconds in my animation, all of these properties are present. Okay, another thing I like to do, if I kind of move back here, if I kind of unselect that, you'll notice if I move my time bar backwards a little bit, you'll notice it disappears, right? I'm not in design mode. You'll notice that my button disappears up until it hits that 9-second mark. And that's because that's where we changed and recorded all of those specific properties. So I'm going to highlight this again. I'm going to highlight the certain components that I changed, and I want to make sure that those are present the entire time. The link, yes, but the pulse, I want to start right at 9. So I'm going to leave that one out of this. And I'm going to come up here to set as neutral property. When I do that now and I move my time bar backwards, you'll notice it fades in with all of those properties intact. Okay, so from here, let's make sure that this is going to stop during our animation. So I'll move my time bar backwards a little bit. I have to turn off design mode in order to make sure this works. Otherwise, my animation will just fly right past that button. But I hit play here, this comes up, and my animation stops, and my button begins to blink. So we've already set that button to continue the animation once the viewer is ready and has located all those parts on the screen. So they'll come up and they'll click on this, and this will continue to play the rest of the animation, showing them how this arm is assembled. So I'll kind of let this play out. I just want to make sure that everyone understands exactly how to assemble this little robot arm. Okay, so towards the end, the reason I bring this up, the reason I let this play, is what happens now at the end of my animation. I don't have any buttons. I still have this button, but what do you think is going to happen when I click it? It has a specific event or link already. What I would most likely do is soon after that person presses this button, in my animation, this button would kind of disappear. Its opacity would go down to 0 so that the user couldn't push it again throughout the remainder of the animation. Now, right at the end of my animation is at 42 seconds. I want to make sure that this user can get back to the actual view that they clicked this animation from. So what I need to do here is I need to add an additional button that brings us back to this view right here, WI5, which is my work instruction view number 5. So I'll turn on design mode again. I'll grab this I'm ready icon. Let's just copy this again. I'll bring this down to the corner here, and let's just give this another name. We'll just say continue. And now because I've changed this as well as this location of this button, I need to highlight those properties and make sure that those keys are set within my animation. I'm also going to hit the set as neutral property so that when this first becomes visible, just after 41 seconds, it already says continue. So I'll set that as neutral. We'll come back here. Let's just ensure. I'll unselect it here. And our continue button. I think I might have set the wrong key here. Let's highlight this. And I'm going to make sure that this opacity is down to 0 at this moment. So I'll come to opacity. And we'll set that property. So without it selected, I move my time bar forward. It should begin to show. And it is not. So I don't know what happened to my button here. Let's try this again. I'm going to grab a text and we'll just create one from scratch. Hit continue, we'll make it a little bigger. And then we will make sure that our buttons are set. Okay, there's our button for continue. I'll move down towards this bottom here, and we need to make sure that right at the very end of the animation, this thing is set for a link back to an original view. So I'll come down to view specific, and I'll choose WI number 5. And again, I've changed the property in this button. Let's record that property here. So if I move this backwards, you'll notice my link property over here says nothing right until it goes to that last second and it pops on there. So we can change links throughout an animation if you have a button that is going to be present the entire time. That's not a problem. It's something you can record at different portions of the animation. So turning this design mode off, I'm going to let this thing kind of play towards the end. It should stop. My continue button should be present, and now I should be able to click on the continue button and it brings me back to my original view. So if we kind of play this from the beginning to see how this works in our actual application, I'll come up here to the beginning just to ensure that everything is working properly. My design mode is turned off. I'm going to go ahead and click next. And I'll just kind of cycle through my different views, making sure that these are looking good. Now here, I'll go ahead and I'll hit begin animation. I'll let our animation play through. I want to make sure this stops on the bill of material with the button that is using the pulse function. There we go. I'll hit my I'm ready button. I have found all my parts, and we will continue now towards the end. There's my continue button. So here I already have a little bit of an issue here. I'm going to stop this animation. And I'm going to grab this continue button, and just for purposes of time, I'm going to delete it, and we'll continue to play. So as we get towards the end here, making sure I'm not in design mode, I can click my continue button, brings me back to my original view, and I can go ahead and click next to continue through the rest of my views. So keep in mind, you really could have an animation sequence at every step if necessary. I don't know if that's overkill, but you absolutely have that option within your interactive document. So all of that being done, you'll notice now creating a link is not very hard. You can create a link on anything. Right? So if I turn on design mode here, I can create a link on this button, right? If we look at the properties down here, I've created a link for next. I could create a link on this text, right? Come down here towards the bottom. I don't have a link here. On this detail view, I can come down towards the bottom. There's my link. And one of the best parts is if I highlight an actual component, maybe I highlight this part. Parts can contain links. So we come down towards the bottom. So I really could have a user click on a part, and that could possibly link them to an external website where they can purchase a spare part. Maybe they click on a subassembly, and it links them to a view of the subassembly being exploded. And then from there, they can click on another subassembly that will explode, et cetera, et cetera. So your users could almost dig down into an assembly just by clicking on different subassemblies within it. So there's tons of options for creating links. And again, you can create links to external files, URLs, FTP, specific views within your view pane, or specific portions of your animation, or the entire animation. So what happens now when we're done, right? We basically created all these links. Well, we have the two options I talked about at the beginning. If I come to Save As, I have the ability to save this as a package. And what this will do is it will not only package this document I've created, which is an SMG format, it will package that along with the Composer player and any external documents that I'm referencing in this authored file. So in this case here, I have that in the upper left-hand corner here, I have this button that links to an external PDF. It will grab that and include everything within the package. The package is saved as an executable, could be written on a CD, you know, I don't know, maybe placed on like a network somewhere so people can grab it as needed when they're on the assembly floor, etc. Or maybe it's something you want to send to your users. So you package your product together, you put your CD in there along with the instructions on it. The other option we have here is to come down to Publish, and you have the ability to do your 3D PDFs as well as HTML. I wanted to show you the HTML today, but unfortunately with GoToMeeting, I can't actually pull up Internet Explorer. It doesn't want to show Internet Explorer. So I'm going to come down here and do a Save As Package. And I'm going to save this in the same folder as the actual SMG file itself, which is no problem. You'll notice your option is EXE. And you have additional options here for how it's published out. I'll go ahead and hit Save. We'll give that just a second. And if I come into my webinar folder, we'll go to 301. You'll see this EXE file that's just been saved. So I'll go ahead and double click this. So keeping in mind, because the Composer player is in this executable, your users that you send this to do not need to install this player beforehand because it's a part of the executable. So here it is. I come in here, I go ahead and I have my entire document within this Composer player, and it's ready to be used by my end users. Right? I click Next, kind of go through this whole portion on any user machine. Come down, begin animation. If you chose to, you could have options to allow them to view specific tabs. Right? So if I come down here, I can allow them to see, let's see, markers here, basically the different markers within the animation. I'm just going to keep continuing in this interactive document while I show you the interface. Tear off toolbars. These things, views pane, so they can kind of click from one view to the next on their own. You really have a lot of different options when creating these interactive documents. And with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today for SOLIDWORKS Composer 301. This has been Dan Lubbe from GoEngineer. Thank you.